First, I will start off by removing the battery cover, locating my main fuse, removing my main fuse to avoid any electrical issues. In order to remove the gas tank, I'll be unplugging my vent tube line, as well as unplugging my sending unit. I will also be removing the rear cylinder head temperature sensor. Using a 1/4 inch socket and a 1/2 inch wrench, I will remove the rear fuel tank bolt. Using the same tool, I'll remove my front fuel tank bolt, as well as my speedo. To remove the fuel tank, you'll need to push up on the quick release in order to pull the fuel line off. Alright, since I've got a coil relocation kit, I've got my coil mounted right here between my cylinders. I'm going to use a T45 to remove the bracket so I can get the coil off. Pull your plug boots off and unplug the coil. I'm going to use the same T45 socket to remove the pivot assembly off the front motor mount. Just makes it easier when you go to remove your rocker box covers. Next, going to remove the 5/8 bolts that attach this front bracket to the head. And while I'm also on this side of the bike, I'm also going to use a 1/2 inch wrench and remove these two intake manifold or intake plenum bolts. Next on the list will be for me to remove my air cleaner. When removing your air cleaner, pay close attention not to lose your gasket. Next, using a 3/4 inch socket, I'm going to remove the head breather bolts. And I'm also going to use a 5/32 hex head socket to remove this bolt. On this side of the bike, I'm going to loosen these two bolts that goes to the plenum that holds the throttle body on. Going to remove those so I can remove the throttle body. I also have to disconnect all appropriate sensors. Also, as a quick side note, please make sure if your stickers are removed or deteriorated, please make sure to mark which fuel injector connector goes to which injector. Next, I'm going to use a 3/16 hex head socket to remove all of my rocker cover bolts. I actually ordered this when I did my rocker locker setup. It comes in really handy if you've got a real small area that you have to get into. It's pretty flat. It's also got a 3/16 hex head. It's also got a slot for a 3/8, like a torque wrench, if you're going to have to torque these back down to inch pounds. All I did was snug them up whenever I put everything back together. But that tool does come in handy. You may or may not need it. The Motion Pro part number is 08-0220. So now at this time, I'm going to remove both my front and rear spark plugs. What that's going to do is help me rotate my engine over. You need to make sure that whatever head that you're working on at the time or cylinder, you need to make sure that that cylinder, that both valves are closed before you go through and start taking your rocker boxes off to prevent damage. So now, with your bike supported off the ground, put your bike in 5th gear. I've rotated my rear wheel to the point of where I'm at top dead center, and both my intake and exhaust valve is closed. Next, I'll be removing the exhaust. To remove the exhaust, I'll be using a 1/2 inch socket to get back in here to the exhaust flange. There's one nut right here, as well as one below. In order to remove all of the bolts that's securing the rocker arm, you need to remove this and this, which is considered bolts 1 in the service manual. Next, you will be removing this bolt, and this bolt, which is labeled as number 2 in the service manual. And then this bolt, this, and this is labeled as number 3 in the manual. Those need to be loosened 1/4 to 1/2 turn in a cross pattern until loose to keep from damaging your rocker box. To ease removal of the cylinders and the heads and everything, I did end up removing this bracket, and now I have no clearance issues in getting to everything that I need to get to. With my rocker boxes removed on both of my cylinders, I'll now remove my heads. The head bolts, per the service manual, are 1, 2, 3, 4 on the front, and 1, 2, 3, 4 on the rear. You loosen those up in eighth of a turn increments until loose. So with the head bolts loosened and the heads removed, I was able to lift the cylinders up, both front and rear, to expose the piston skirt. That right there will enable me to get to the C-clips or circlips here on the front and the rear. Before I do that, I want to follow Hammer Performance's precautions. They recommend that you shove blue or white shop towels down the cylinders. That way, if by some chance something does get dropped in this process of swapping everything over, that you're not having to fish it out or run the risk of having to have a motor tear down in order to get the debris removed. After removing the circlips, I removed the wrist pins and pulled the cylinders and pistons off. Now, disassembly is complete, and I can begin to reassemble my 1250 kit. I've already installed my pushrod tube O-rings, as well as my cylinders, pistons. As for right now, I've cleaned the assembly lube off of this cylinder, rotated the wheel, cleaned the assembly lube off of this cylinder, and wiped off the top of the piston. Once I get the head on this cylinder, I'll move to the front and do the same thing. I'll clean all of the assembly lube that's inside in the cylinder above the piston, wipe off the top of the piston, and install the head on that cylinder as well. This right here is a 1/2 inch union PVC. When you're installing your cylinders, you can use this 1/2 inch union and just run your 2 short head bolts down. That will allow you to rotate the rear wheel to be able to install the second cylinder. In the install instructions, they're really detailed, telling you what to do and what tools that you should have. You are going to need a factory service manual. It's going to give you step-by-step on torque specs and sequences for loosening and tightening everything down. Installed my pushrod tubes with my new O-rings. Put the 2 new O-rings up in the head. I also changed out the valve stem seals. Put the heads on using the directions given by Hammer Performance, as well as the proper torque sequence in the service manual. I've also went back through and installed my rocker box, installed all my new gaskets, and now I'm going to move on to the other cylinder. So with my cylinders back together, got everything reassembled. With your cylinders reassembled, you can go back through and install your plenum, your throttle body, make all your electrical connections, install your air cleaner, as well as your exhaust. Part number 5309, and that's going to be the Denso Iridium plugs that they recommend. Also going to go through and put a small amount of anti-seize on the threads so we don't run into any issues. I've also went through and put a little bit of dielectric grease on the inside of the spark plug boots. Helps to prevent corrosion. It also helps to be able to remove the boots later on if you want to change plugs. It helps you to keep from damaging the boots whenever you take them off. Alright, so since I have the Power Vision already installed on the bike previously, being able to tune it for the Hammer kit was relatively simple. I emailed a copy of my original tune to Aaron at Hammer Performance. They made the appropriate adjustments to the tune, and he emailed me a copy of that back. I've already went on my laptop and downloaded the tune. I went in and saved that to the PowerVision via the USB cable that plugs into it. So now all I've got to do is go in under my custom tunes, which, go back out here and do that. This right here is your main screen. Go to Program Vehicle, accept, load tune, custom tunes, and right here's where I saved it, starting point mic. Select that, and this is basically everything that it said. And then right here, down here towards the bottom, says 2/14/2018 for Hammer Performance Kit is modified. So that's the tune that we want. We hit continue, hit flash, that will send the tune to the ECU. Reset trim, yes. They've already set the displacement, they've set all ignition fuel, they've already set all the parameters that need to be, that is in a safe run condition for the break-in of the kit. And so I've loaded that tune up now. It says please turn off the key and wait 10 seconds before turning key back on. Just hit OK. So now I'll turn the key off, wait 10 seconds, turn it back on, and the tune will be loaded up and ready to go. I do have to run this original starting point tune for 20 miles after my heat cycles and break-in. I can run an auto-tune session on here, and it'll go back through and just sort of fine-tune any adjustments that need to be made. And now, first startup. This will be heat cycle number 2. Heat cycle number 3. This right here will be heat cycle 4. With my heat cycle complete, I can now do my 1 mile and 2 mile runs, and we'll make sure that the motor cools down in between each run. So as of right now, I've already done all my heat cycles. I've done my 1 and 2 mile runs, letting everything cool in between each process, cool completely back down to ambient temperature. And I've also went and started my 500 mile break-in period now. The install in total took me around 7 hours to complete. I must say that if you own a Sportster that's a 883, by all means, if you are happy with your bike but you're unhappy with the performance of it, please give a 1250 kit a serious thought. Personally, when I bought this bike, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money. You know, because I wanted to be able to build it to what I wanted. As far as power goes, there is a drastic increase in power. You know, anyone who rides an 883 pretty well knows that, you know, you start going up a hill and, you know, or slightly roll on the throttle just to get up the hill. With the 1250 kit, that's not the case. You can keep the throttle you know, basically stationary, and it's going to pull you up the hill regardless. I've got about 80 miles on the break-in right now, and as soon as my 500 mile break-in happens, I'll come back and do a follow-up video for that. I just want to give a big shout out to Aaron and Dan, both of those guys at Hammer. And I know people have been dealing with these guys for years, but you know, with the technology and YouTube and all of that, there's an outlet for people to be able to you know, at least document what they're doing, or be able to write some sort of informative or make some sort of informative video for people. That way, you know, if you have questions, you know, maybe you can find an answer to those questions. I do not think that any of the money that I've spent for the kit has went to waste. With this kit, I've definitely got a new respect for my bike. Maybe a new respect isn't the exact words that I need to be saying. I've found a new love for the motorcycle. There's a lot of things that I like about my Sportster, and the 1250 kit makes it to where I love everything about it, and there's not much that I have any issues with at all. Well, if you're wanting a lot more power out of your motorcycle, definitely give the guys at Hammer Performance a call. If you're looking for more power out of your bike, a 1250 kit is the way to go, and it's by far the best bang for your buck. I'd appreciate it if you guys liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you would, and you'd like to see more videos. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the little bell icon, and you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. But anyway, thanks for watching, and ride safe.